You know, and we all have our 15 minutes of fame, and I'd like to take a couple of my 15 minutes to talk about the rights and the wrongs in the world of professional wrestling.
And it is for the WWE Championship.
This match is for the ECW World Heavyweight Championship.
The World Heavyweight Championship.
The match and new NWA Heavyweight Champion.
We appreciate you guys coming out and taking your time to support women's wrestling in America.
This match is for the AWA World Heavyweight Wrestling Championship.
Today on the podcast, we have a young lady that some of you may know under different guises. For those that were fans of Wrestlicious, she may be known to you as Tyler Texas. For those that are in the fitness scene, you may know her as her name of Amy Janice. But for those of you wrestling fans, you probably know her as the good-natured, sweetheart Southern girl, Lorelei Lee. She's going to be joining me today and talk about life in the business of pro wrestling for women and how she's experienced it. So, Miss Lorelei Lee, if you don't mind me calling you that name, because that's just what I'm used to.
Yeah, that's fine. Good morning, and thank you very much for having me.
It is my pleasure and honor to have you on the show. I'm very happy that I was able to find you, first off, because it took a little while to kind of track you down. I was like, oh, man, I actually got her. Wow. Oh, yeah, this is a good thing. So let's start this at the beginning. Where are you from originally?
I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and then from there I went on to schooling for my undergrad in Moon Township, Pennsylvania at Robert Morris University, and then after that I went to Stunt school out in Seattle, Washington, and then I made my way down to Tampa, Florida to start my wrestling training.
Oh, okay. Now let's go back to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and you have the character or the persona of Lorelei Lee. Where did that come from? Because in my mind it doesn't connect, but I mean, maybe I'm missing something.
A lot of people ask me that, and believe it or not, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, it's a very industrial town, but there is a lot of rural life with farming. It was at one time the area that I lived in, the suburbs, it was a farm town until it became the suburbs. And it's just always been my draw to kind of lean towards more of the country. I've always said to my parents growing up, one day I'm going to live on a farm. So I guess that's always kind of carried with me, and it just happened to come out to be a Southern type character, and the name took countless hours to come up with. And I thought that would be the easy part, and it really wasn't. And Malaya actually helped come up with the name along with Lexi Fife.
Okay, so now that is Malaya Hosaka that you're talking about.
Oh, yes.
Okay, just want to clarify for those listening who is currently, last we saw, wrestling with the Shine promotion in Tampa and was one half of the tag team champions with that promotion. So if anybody is interested in seeing what Malaya has done in recent years, there you have it. You can download the matches directly off of, I think, Wrestling WNW, the Wrestling Network. I'm getting it wrong, so let me stop myself if I butcher their website. But you can find it. It's there. It exists. The one half of Legendary. Okay, here we go. Before you go any further, I feel the need to bring up, as Googling the name Lorelei
Lee. Yes.
I think you probably know where I'm going with that.
Yes, I do. And I should have Googled that name prior to taking the name, because that name is actually a well-known name in the adult industry.
I was not aware of it.
to put it politely. But yeah, I found out a couple years after that there is, if you Google that name, that it is a well-known adult entertainer that does that. But I mean, on the other side, there is a song called Lorelei, and so that dates back to prior to even when either one of us was born. So
okay. But but again, for the people that are listening that may feel the urge, like, oh, I haven't seen her, let me Google the name. Please put Lorelei Lee Wrestler in the search bar, because you will get something else. And it threw me off for a second. I was like, oh my God, did she do something else with it? Like, okay, that's not her. So yes, I did get introduced to that, little bit of a surprise. Wrestling, which clearly is not a easy thing to do by any stretch of the imagination. Why did you decide, of all the things that you could do in your life? You're a very attractive young lady. You could have, I know that you done some modeling, I believe. You probably could have gotten into acting or, things of that nature. So why choose wrestling?
well, it was one of those things. Okay, let me back up a little bit. In high school, when wrestling was the huge thing and everybody went around, and I knew nothing about wrestling when I was in high school. And during the late 1990s, it was like 97 through 99. It was hugely popular throughout school and in my area. I actually did not know anything about wrestling, and people got real big into it, and, the Triple H era and everything like that. And I actually made fun of them. Looking back on it, I feel really bad right now for doing such things. But then, lo and behold, I went to college, and during that time, I was watching an MTV series that I didn't know the name of. They were just doing an interview with one of the cast members, and how they said, hey, if you like traveling and you like being athletic. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is so me. Let me find out what exactly they're talking about. And it ended up being the first series of Tough Enough from the MTV casting. And I was like, sign me up. What do I have to do? And so I kind of followed up a little bit more, watching the series a little bit. And I'm like, oh, I can do this. And so then I started watching wrestling for the first time. And I was like, yes, this is what I need to do. I am not meant for a 9-to-5 job. And, I was like, all right, I graduate, and 3 months from now, let's go do this wrestling thing.
Okay.
So that's pretty much what I kind of did.
And from that, you said you trained in Tampa. Is that correct?
I did. I went down to Tampa, Florida, and I trained over in St. Pete. Okay.
And how was your experience going into training?
It was good. It was fun. I was very blessed that actually I posted on, there's a Glory website, and at the time it was a very active forum, and I posted, hey, wanting to break into the business as a wrestler and get trained. And I had 2 responses, one from a Jason, and he said, you're going to want to talk to Lexi Pipe. And Lexi Pipe also chimed in and said, when you move to the area, here's my contact information. You can go ahead and get a hold of me. And so I packed up my car, and I got in it, and I drove to Tampa. And it was like free spirit world, apparently, because I didn't have a place to stay. I knew nothing about the state of Florida, let alone the city of Tampa. And I figured, well, let's see what happens. It can't be that hard to just up and move. So I up and moved, and when I did get into Tampa, I found a youth hostel to stay at, and I reached out to Lexi Fife, and she kind of gave me the heads up of different training areas in the area. And, she mentioned to go ahead and go look at them and sit through a practice and see where I felt most comfortable taking up the trade. So that's what I did.
Well, so you were serious. You just packed up all your belongings, went down, and, all right, I'm going to give this thing a go. Just that simple.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, my mind was made up. It was set on, I got to accomplish this, so. I did what I said I was going to do. I'm one of those go-getters that when I say something, it really means I'm going to be doing it within the next month or so.
Okay,
And
now,
I did that.
you know, maybe it's not proper form. It's never proper form to discuss age with a lady, but you know, when I look at your pictures, like, how old were you when you went there? Because you look super young. I was thinking, like, what was she, like 16 or 17 when she tried out? My goodness.
Oh, that's kind words. I hope I continue to get those kind words as I continue to age. No, but as far as my age, I was out of college. So I want to say I was probably about 22 maybe?
Okay.
21, 22 when I started with my training.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was still fairly young and, you know, I was very young looking just because of, you know, my features and my baby face and my chubby cheeks. So I think that kind of all contributes to everything.
Okay. Well, we'll go with that. I think that a lot of people have agreed that you probably didn't look the part of a 22 or 21-year-old at the time. So that's a good thing. Very good. To sidetrack a second, you're also a certified stunt woman. Is that correct?
Yes, I did not actively pursue that, but I did go out and to Seattle, Washington, and I took the utilities workshop. It was a 3 or 4 week long course. And I also took, I believe it was a 2-week course for master aerial work to coincide with that. When I was getting involved in the wrestling, right before I went to Tampa, I went out there, and that's always been my dream. You know, most people's dream is to go to college. Well, I remember sitting down and talking with my counselor, and I said, I need to go to a college that has stunts. And they looked at me and they're like, the fellow said, no, that does not exist, and you're going to a college. Here's a computer. Pick out your colleges that you want to apply to. Like, there wasn't no ifs, and, or buts. Like, it was predetermined. I was going through my guidance counselor to college, and he thought I was crazy, I think, at the time when I was like, well, where's the college that sends me to do stuff? So I did do that, and that ended up, you know, I never pursued anything with the stunts, but I do believe it did help me when I did start my wrestling training. So it kind of goes hand in hand.
Did it ever cross your mind that once you were done with it, that, okay, well, I can go back and let's get this stunt work a try?
I thought about it, and I did apply, or I went to, like, an open casting for Circus Soleil, and it was a Japan casting.
Okay.
And I did very well in it, and I got put on the list. Apparently they open cast it, but there was no positions available at the time. Should one of became available, they said I was one of the top 3 on their list to bring back and put under contract. But it's okay, because that fell through, and that's the same time I started my wrestling training, so it just happened to be, it was more in my path to continue the wrestling route, which I'm very happy about.
Okay. You know, I kind of envisioned the old Fall Guy TV show. Like, you know, you could have moonlighted as a stunt person and wrestled during the day. I don't know. The persona of Lorelei Lee as you created her, is it that much different than you personally?
Probably. No, not really.
No?
I was at the time I was saying no, not really. I am a very bubbly person, and I believe that comes across in my matches and my entrances, and I do try to do good at the time. I try to do good by people, and I was, you know, very naive to the world, I guess, is thinking like everybody was your friend and everything's great and everybody's there to help and support you, and you know, just general life, being young experiences, which, you know, I think is great that every young person, I feel, should have that type of, you know, persona of knowing what until they really find out what the world's really like, I guess.
Well, hopefully the world hasn't
the innocence, I guess I'm trying to come across. The innocence of, being, through your childhood, and, that I definitely think came across when I started wrestling as well. Which was a good thing. So
it did. I don't recall seeing you operate as a heel all that often. I think I might have seen 2 matches where you were
about it.
where you were basically part of the heel team, or you were the heel, the singular heel in the match. And that's pretty much it. Every other time that I've seen you were, pretty much happy-go-lucky, smiling, and it came across. It was a very natural thing. I almost didn't even want to accept you as a heel. So.
I tried a heel once. It just wasn't it just wasn't a part of me. I couldn't understand when people were telling me what it was to be like a heel. And then, as you can see, like, years later, when I was, like, more in my late 20s, probably about, like, 7 years into the business, I actually started doing a couple more heel things here and there through Slam'emLadies.com from a custom match. People want to see me being a heel. And you can tell, like, life has kicked in because I knew, like, I understood what it meant to be a heel. Like, so it was easier for me to go ahead and portray a heel character. And nowadays, I have no problems with that. So, I mean, you asked me to be mean. I understand what you're asking me to be. So,
wow.
Over the years, nowadays, it was kind of amusing that I was always a baby face. And in the last couple of years, I was active in wrestling with customs, at least. That people were requesting me more and more to be a heel, and I actually started liking being a heel, and I'm like, where was this my whole life? So,
no.
I think life evolved me into being more of a heel and understanding the principle and the concept behind it that I wasn't able to portray when I first just broke into the business.
Don't ruin my image of you. I so want you to be a babyface.
Oh, I still am until you. I mean, that's who I am naturally. I really try to.
You have to be pushed.
Yeah, I do. Like, I'm nice, and then all of a sudden it's like the light switch flipped in. Okay, there's like no in between. It was just nice to mean.
Yeah, I really wanted to just remember Lorelei Lee as the smiling, babyface, good-natured, good-hearted. That's what I want. But, I'm not the booker, so what can I say? Tell me about the business. Not, just after training, and as I spoke to you offline a little bit, I said you were, in my view, part of that first wave of lady wrestlers that came across after what I term as the Great Wrestling Depression. You, Cindy Rogers, Mercedes Martinez, Sarah Del Rey, Amber O'Neal, Amber Gallows now, and several other girls that's kind of hit the scene roughly within a year or two of each other. And it was just, fortunately, you had the rise of YouTube and the internet on your side, so you kind of able to get your names across and get it out there. But how was the business overall? Was it friendly to you? Were they giving ladies a hard time? Was it difficult in terms of travel or arrangements? So, what have you? Just how was your experience overall?
Well, it's so funny that you classify me in with that core group of girls or ladies, I should actually say, because when I first broke into the business, to me, those were like core group. Like, I was looking to them like, oh, I'm in the same room as them. Like, your first thing as far as etiquette goes is to go up and introduce yourself and say hello. And meanwhile, inside you're like, oh my gosh, I can't talk to these people. They're just like, that's what I'm trying to become. Like, well, how do I even go up to them and say hello? It's nice to meet you. And I'm like, you know, it's very shy and very intimidating. And, you know, it was surreal the first time that I went to an all-girls show. And I saw them all, and I was just like, I can't talk to them.
So what was the all-girls show?
It wasn't, I don't recall the name of the promotion, but I remember it was an all-girls show, and I believe it was up in North Carolina.
Okay.
Lexi Fife, she was my mentor at the time. She's like, hey, why don't you come with me? You can get introduced to the girls. And I was still training at the time. So it was just such an honor to be invited to go on the road trip and to actually experience an all-girls show and see these women that are just, you know, the skills that they have was just, you know, leaps and bounds above and beyond what was kind of expected of female wrestlers back in those years, in like early 2000s, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yes.
So, you know, that was so intimidating, but I can honestly tell you every single one of them was so kind. Like, I don't know what I was expecting. I wasn't expecting anything, and every single one of them, like, made me feel welcomed, and they were so eager to say, hey, if you need anything, you let me know. If you have any questions, let me know, you know, and very supportive of each other. So it was very nice to see, especially since you kind of hear horror stories along the way of, you know, cattiness or just very territorial. And I was in a room full of ladies that had so much talent, and they were so nice and friendly and open, and, you know, it was just like one big get together of like a core group of friends that just happened. I just met, but they make it seem like you've known them forever. Mm-hmm. So it was a very positive experience coming into the business, going into my first couple of shows, the ladies that I worked with, and against opponents, they were, you know, I think they understood where I was coming from with breaking into the business, and so they did their best to, you know, kind of help with the ease of everything and to make sure that we were both doing our jobs and giving 100% to the fans and to the audience to the best of our abilities that I was capable of.
Okay. Now, you are absolutely correct. I want to touch back on something you just said and that I know you don't technically classify yourself as part of that group, but in my mind you are, so I'm just gonna lump you in there. But you and the other ladies that were mentioned did perform at a different level than what was expected of you. And I think that's the real key. I think you hit the nail on the head with that, is that the expectation overall wasn't as high as what was presented by them, which is a large part of the reason that I started to follow it. Specifically, I could say that Rogers and Martinez did make me a believer. So from that, it kind of spawned off like, well, let me see what the next person has to offer. Let me see what they can do. Let me see what this person can do. And then before you know it, you're pretty familiar with a lot of people on the scene, which takes me back to the website that you used to kind of get yourself involved. It was the first one that I can recall that actually centered on and featured it, glorywrestling.com. Aside from the fact that you found your training through them, was there anything else that was instrumental that came through that site? Because I know the attempt was to kind of help with bookings, I thought, along the way.
I believe it did. What I felt it did from my perspective before I start wrestling was it was a great informative site. I mean, if you have questions, you post, people replied. You know that what your replies were coming from other wrestlers, too, that were currently on the site. So I think that was a huge plus to know that you weren't just getting information from anybody off the street. There were people that were involved in the business. It definitely did help as far as bookings go with the females because you kind of saw what area they're from, their style of wrestling, who trained them, the information of just putting a handful of females out on the website to, promoters looking to book somebody, or just girls wanting to say, oh, I need to find an opponent. Let me see who's available or what's out there. And so it was just a good central point to network.
Okay. Unfortunately, I'm not sure. Well, I know that the site still exists, but I'm not sure if it's really all that active anymore. I think it's kind of just there.
I know that one time it was very active, especially when I broke into the business. I think it was pretty active until the late 2000s. And then it just seemed to kind of dwindle. There was a lot of spam getting into the forums because of social media booming with the MySpace and the Facebook, and I think more girls decide to really focus on trademarking themselves, and they weren't using the site maybe as much. I know here and there, people would chime in, but it wasn't the focal point that it was when I originally got interested in the business. As far as it being still active, I'm not quite sure.
Well, I know the site is there, and anybody that's listening, you're more than welcome to look them up, glorywrestling.com. The site still is available. I don't know if the activity is there. And the only real thing that I know that you can get from it now is there are several notable names that are there that you probably didn't know existed on the independent circuit at the time. So, I mean, if you're a historian, I guess, or if you want to learn that portion of it, you can go in there, scan through like Gail Kim, who was, I think at the time, La Felina. Yeah, just little tidbits like that. But, you also, like I said before, you also entered the business around the time that the Great Wrestling Depression, ECW, WWE's made that march into being the singular game in town, and it took a little while for other promotions to kind of come in and fill the void. So was that transition of an ECW shutting down and a WCW shutting down and the spawn-off independents that were kind of clinging on to that wrestling boom shutting down, and then you had the rise of the TNA or ROH and other promotions that came a little while later. In between that time, were you on the circuit? Was it a different vibe than what you would come into later on when the other promotions started to kind of come up? How well do you remember that?
Well, you're mentioning during the Great Depression that you're calling it, whereas when I started getting interested and involved in the business was 2003, and that was actually, WWE had a very strong females division. It was just shortly after I broke into the business, I went through my training in 04, early 05, that it kind of got squashed. It just didn't seem like WWE had that full thrive with the females really showing off their skill set from a wrestling perspective. And, that was very sad to see, because it's like that's what got me interested in it as far as WWE at the time was going. And that disappointed me. But as far as the independents go, I only heard stories about how there were strong crowds. Like there was a stronger pool, I guess, of people as far as independents go and the crowds that came. But I didn't see that. I wasn't involved in the business when thousands of people came to see the, independent shows in your local areas. So I only knew it from, some shows that had like 200-300, and then there's some shows that were in more the South, Virginia, Carolina, a little bit into Georgia, I believe. It still had that strong pool where your attendance was 800 to 2,000.
Okay.
And so it was kind of like I was part of that mixed generation where I really didn't know when I actually started taking bookings on the independent circuit as far as the numbers, because to me, I broke into actually accepting bookings when I guess it was more towards the lower end than when it was at its peak.
Okay.
And then I saw a difference though from state to state.
Okay.
As far as attendance goes. I mean, Virginia has always been like the big wow go-to spot for pulling crowds.
All right. So yeah, you were just after that bite. You weren't there when the ECW and all that other stuff crashed and or went out of business. So yeah, that's basically all you've known. And as far as the ladies of the WWE was concerned, that late '90s, early 2000 crowd, I'm assuming that you're talking about the Ivories, the Trish Stratuses, Victoria, Molly Holly, Jazz, so on and so forth, which is a pretty strong crop. You are correct. But you also had the opportunity to work at, I guess, one of the more notable all-women promotions out in the Midwest, Shimmer.
Yes, that is correct.
How was your experience working with that promotion?
Oh, I enjoyed it. I mean, at the time, there was no better place to go surround yourself with the cream of the crop talent across the world. I mean, it's not even within the U.S., it was across the world. The amount of talent that is in the locker room that you can gain the knowledge from and be surrounded by such supportive females was just incredible.
Okay. Now, I want to say the only available match for you online right now, at least the only one I found, I'm sure you had more than that in Shimmer, was you and Sarah Del Rey.
Okay. Yeah, that was the short one, correct? It was like a 3-minute.
That's correct.
Something.
Yep.
Yes. That I have more. I know that they have different volumes. I'd have to go through my DVD collection to see exactly which volumes that I am on. But there was a span of, I want to say six different volumes, maybe even 8 different volumes that I'm a part of. But I have to say that the match with Sarah Del Rey was so much fun, and she was crazy busy that day, and literally before we walked out the curtain, she was like, "Can you do this spot?" And I said, "I don't know." She's like, "I've never done it before." I said, I don't even really know what you're doing. She's like, "Hold on a second." She flipped me around. She's like, "Okay, that will work." And we went out and we did our 3-minute match, and I was just like, okay, that's a woman right there that can work. I mean, to be quite honest, I mean, that was one thing I was like, oh, we're up now? Okay. Hi. And then, literally right before we went out, it was the first time we even got to approach each other, because she had 2 other matches or 3 other matches that day, and so that was before that they started. I believe they now do Shine over a 2-day period, and this is when they were just doing a 1-day period.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Okay, so fond memories of the Shimmer promotion.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now you almost have 2 entirely opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of all female promotions. Talking from, you got the, I guess, very wrestling-based, heavy mat work-oriented Shimmer, and then you have Wrestlicious, which is very character-driven, storyline-wise. They don't even call it a roster; they call it the cast. So your time with Wrestlicious. First, how were you approached for that? I mean, because I think most people know the story that the young man who's a lottery winner has his dream, opens up the all-female promotion. So how were you approached for that, and how was the time shooting those episodes?
Well, it started out, I was living with Rain, Radiant Rain at the time, in Tampa for a brief period of, I think it was 3 months. I had a work contract. in Tampa, and she was contacted by Johnny C. and to say, hey, I'm working on this deal with a J. He was the lottery winner, to put an all-female promotion together. And he reached out to Ring to help with getting the cast, or what they're calling the cast, or the female wrestling talent. Because they did bring in models and actresses, and so her job was to kind of help him with picking out the female wrestlers. And she's like, Johnny, you really need to have Lorelei. You know, she's a great person. And she can wrestle, but, you know, and so she really talked me up. And I was very flattered and fortunate, because at first I don't think I was, like, on his top list of styles that he really wanted to bring in. But then he came into town, and we all went out to dinner, and I met with him, and he's like, he turned around to Rain, and he's like, yes, we need her. And she was like, I told you. So that's kind of how that happened, was over dinner. And a couple months later, it went through that they did hold the tapings for Wrestlicious, and it was so much fun. I mean, I understand how the show comes off. It's very
campy, perhaps.
It's what it is. Let's put it that way. But it was so much fun, and I know all the wrestlers, even the actresses that were brought in, had a lot of fun doing it. I know it seemed I know a lot of people are like, that's so corny and that's so stupid, but I call it stupid funny. Like, there were times that I'm like, really, you need me to do this? And I make it sound like it was amusing, and I just laughed at myself, because I'm like, oh, okay. But I mean, I wouldn't take that back at all, that experience, because it was a wonderful, great, fun, loving experience that involved wrestling. So to have that much fun and do work and to be able to show off your athletic abilities for wrestling, it like hit all the key points that a dream job would have.
Okay. Now, I will say my opinions about Wrestlicious have changed over the years. I probably fell originally into that camp of guys. I was like, oh, this is ridiculous. It's not a show that I could get behind, until I had the interview with Mercedes Martinez, who I'm sure you remember as Maria Toro,
yes,
on the show. And it was amazing to me that I was like, but you're like the serious wrestler. How did you even bother? It's like, well, you know, it's different. It's like, you want to have some fun sometime. It's like, and starting with her, I don't think I've heard a single negative or derogatory thing about the experience that was had at Wrestlicious, or for a while for that matter, which is very much in the same vein as that. Everybody's always been like, they treated me super nice, professional. I had fun. I got to do something that I don't normally get to do. So I will speak for the guys that maybe aren't as good with that. You got to look at it from a different perspective. If it was fun for them, then it's good for me, and I'll leave it at that.
Well, one thing that Wrestlicious, I will have to say, that I think kind of got a negative connotation is that we have these very serious female wrestlers and that wrestled matches. And I think when they saw the show overall, they thought it was kind of demeaning and undermined our ability.
Mm-hmm.
But if you actually stand back and if you're just a serious person that's interested in straight wrestling matches, if you just watch the straight matches, you're going to see a solid wrestling performance that you would see at your local indie show or on, mainstream wrestling television. If you are a kid, though, and that's what I think that they were trying to tap into all audiences, kids come up to me and they're like, hey, I saw you on TV, and I know exactly that they're talking about Wrestlicious, and they thought it was, like, they didn't see it from, like, the wrestling perspective. They saw it as, like, more like of a cartoon experience of female wrestling, and, like, that kind of changed my mind as far as, for me personally, as far as, I did it from wrestling perspective, I had a great time, but from an audience perspective and seeing it through their eyes, how it did tap into all different categories. It tapped into the kids, pulling them in and being captivated by these characters that were over the top, ridiculous for an adult. But it also, if you were into wrestling, you got to see the wrestling side too. So it kind of encompassed a lot of things in a very small amount of time. I mean, it had sex appeal for those seeking the sex appeal. It had the child's perspective because of the over-the-top characters that, you know, kind of came across like a little bit cartoonish, so to speak. You know, they were just over the top. But then it also tapped into people that were more kind of serious towards wrestling. So it had different components to it. And I think that's what made it such a great experience for the wrestlers or the cast that were involved in it, because we got to tap into all those different things. Like, we didn't have to be pigeonholed into one role. We got to fulfill several different aspects and roles in one show.
I love that. And that, it always seemed like, again, from the ones that I've talked to, and you basically verified it with your experience as well, that the time there was good. As a witness or a fan watching the program, there was only one thing that kind of put me off to it after that, and it was just the commentary. The commentary killed me. But other than that, other than him, and it's only because it was a nonstop joke machine. That's all. That's like, you know, if that worked in play, I probably would have been perfectly fine. So I just wound up like, all right, let me just turn it down and I'll watch the show. And,
exactly. You just mute it.
and it worked. The character that you were on this program, Tyler, Texas, is that just Lorelei Lee under a different name, in your opinion, or was there a major difference there?
I wouldn't say there was a major difference. There was some things that were like way over the top for even me, and I'm pretty bubbly and over the top, but I had to like even turn that up like 500%. So, like I said, at times I was even laughing at myself at what I needed to do and portray, but I mean, it was so much fun, so I was okay with it. But I would say the underlining, yes, I mean, but I mean, there's some things that were way over the top, but I had fun doing it, so I was happy that I was able to live up to the expectations that they wanted for that particular character.
You sound like you just had a ball.
I did.
If
I would do it all over again. I would.
I was just about to ask you, if they were to go back into business tomorrow and they had the funds and they had the distribution, would you say, yes, I'm on board? And I'm guessing
yes, 100%. 100%.
Okay. Now,
I think everybody from that cast would be like, yes, sign me up, because everybody just had a great weekend.
Okay. Fair enough. Now, you know, the counterpart to that is WoW. And I know you haven't had any doings with WoW, at least none that I'm aware of. Let me not say I know you haven't had any. But to the best of my knowledge, you haven't worked with David McLean's variation of it. You do know about the WoW promotion that was out in Vegas. When did they run? They ran in 2001, I believe. And they have here they are, some 12 years later. They're trying to kick it back off again. If that were to come across but if that were to come across your plate today, I know Wrestlicious is a yes. If WoW Superheroes say, hey, we want to expand and we're interested in getting, you know, a character such as yours, would that be something that you put under consideration?
I would say yes. I would consider it, but I would be upfront with them. I know I reached out to them. I wasn't around in 2001 when they first started, but when they did pop up, you know, you mentioned, I think 10, 11 years later, I did email them and send them all my information, but I wasn't contacted back, or they weren't looking at the specific I think that they said that they were trying to cast actors and wrestlers out in that particular area. So transportation and all that wasn't kind of included in the deal. So I just kind of let it go by the wayside. If they were to contact me, I would consider to see what they're proposing. I'm not saying yes, I wouldn't say no. I would be open to it as far as hearing what they have to say and what type of character development. I don't know if I would want to go back into wrestling 100% and take all those bumps again and go get retrained and put my body through all that. I really enjoyed it during my 20s, but now that I'm in my 30s, I don't know what my body has left in it from that perspective. But, you know, I would always be open to hearing, you know, what they had to say, maybe bring me in a different role or capacity, or maybe like slowly bringing me back into like a wrestling, like a full wrestling match, maybe just doing spots here and there and kind of seeing how I feel from there to be like, yes, I got it back, you know, I got the bite back in me. I want a match, a full match type thing. Or if it's like, no, I enjoyed my time, but I think it's time for me to explore different options as far as my life goes and my career and, you know, down that path.
I'm sure there are several fans of yours right now that are tearing up that they may have lost you. Well, you know, not as far as WOW is concerned, I'm not entirely sure what their position is. Just for clarification's sake, because I've done a couple of blogs on this particular topic and that promotion, because there have been a ridiculous amount of people that constantly ask on their forums, when are you coming back on TV? When is it coming back on? Are y'all coming back on TV? It's the same question over and over and over again. And I did have the opportunity to interview a few of the cast members or roster or whatever you want to call them. And I got the press release from the company, and I know that they are, you know, again, I think this is probably the third attempt, technically speaking, to bring this thing back up. And I don't know if they're in a position to offer anybody, you know, outside of that area much. Mm-hmm. I know that they have some people that aren't in the area that they probably deal with out of either seniority or loyalty. Erica Porter, I don't know if you had the chance to work with her. She said she was in Wrestlicious also. I think as the Exterminator, something like that. But yeah, as far as I know, that they're pretty close to their guns are pretty close to the hip right now. I think they got to get themselves back up and running to some capacity with original material before they even attempt to look out for other people. So nothing I would be feeling bad about for certain. I can tell you that. But in any case, you said that you made effort towards them. Now, around 2007, TNA, now commonly known to a lot of people as Impact Wrestling, made a run at grabbing a lot of independent wrestlers and, you know, across the indie circuit. And for a while there, some people would have deemed that as the superior women's division. Did you ever have any contact, or did you ever try to contact TNA/Impact for time there, or maybe a run, or whatever the case would be?
In 2007, they had a very strong division, and I didn't feel that my wrestling would be able to live up to what they were seeking, from what I saw. So there was a good group there, and so I wasn't really pursuing them at the time. I was just kind of enjoying the independent circuit more, and you know, I guess it was more self-conscious and kind of instead of throwing it out there to see what happens, which I normally do in life. But in 2009, 2009, I want to say, I did send them information in regards to me, with the help of Lexi Fife. She really helped me with the video types and getting everything together to submit into the office. And in 2009, they did the New Year's Eve TNA,
New Year's Knockout Eve, yeah.
Yes. And so I got called in to do that, and that was a whirlwind. It wasn't at all what I was expecting, what I was walking into, and what I walked out with. It was a complete 360. You know, I got called 2 weeks before, I think, the taping, and they said, Amber O'Neill, that wrestled as Amber O'Neill at the time, you know, she strongly recommended you to bring you in as one of the girls and to tag with her.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I was being brought in to either do a tag team match with her or just be like one of the backups if one of the other girls, something were to happen, it would just fall through, that they would have like a girl like on in the back should they need somebody, you know, kind of like as a spare. So when I went in to the TNA thing, that's what I had in the back of my mind, like take care of all the, you know, your main roster girls, then take care of the girls that were called in to really do a match, either it be for a dark match or for TV taping. And I was just kind of hanging low, trying to stay out of everybody's way, because in the back of my mind I was like, oh, I'm just one of the backups. And then a couple hours later, I got pulled in to talk to some of the management in the office there, and Amber and me were going to then do a dark match, I believe, as a tag team group, which is great because we have great chemistry working together. When we were opponents, our matches always seemed to flow and go really well together. They weren't things like we really had to plan out. There's something about our chemistry together just always clicked. So we're like, oh, we can definitely tag then, and everything will be good. And then like an hour later or something, they come and get me and they're like, we switched things up, but you're going to be tag teaming with April and you're not doing a dark match. You're going to be doing a taping against the current tag team champions. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, I'm like, wait a second. I thought I was just the girl in the back just hanging out and chilling for the day. Just, you know, taking in the fact that I was even asked to be there to going into a TV match against their tag team champions at the time. So, yeah, that was so very surreal in the whole making of everything, from what I was called in to doing, and I followed up with them like a week or two later, and it seemed like that they were contemplating actually on bringing either myself or April Hunter in to actually probably bring on as a you know, as part of their talent, or, you know, how they were doing the per show contract. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, nothing really came about from that. I can honestly say, though, I didn't really push for it, because at that time, that's when I was kind of looking for a different career path. I gave wrestling a shot in my 20s. In the back of my head, wrestling was a great part of me, but it was time to really focus on my future. So I didn't really push for the TNA thing following up to my TNA match.
Okay.
So, yeah, I was in schooling and trying to figure out what the rest of my life was going to bring to me at the time.
All right. Again, I know that's a sad point, and some of the guys out there that may be listening to this that you had a change of career path. But we also know that that aired end of 2009, going into 2010, and they had a major change in direction at that point. And a lot of the group of women who helped make it were either released or left after Hogan and Bischoff came in, and it seemed like the Knockouts division was pretty much an afterthought for a long period of time. Now, let me say again, I do this every time I bring it up. I'm not saying that Hogan or Bischoff were personally responsible for that before anybody gets up in arms, before they send me a letter or whatever the case would be. But just saying that the timing that it happened coincided with the introduction of a Hulk Hogan and an Eric Bischoff and the changes that were instituted thereof. Okay, now I've covered my bases.
You're correct. And, you know, with me pushing the TNA thing, that when I saw the changes that were taking place, and I was like, no, this isn't the right direction for me. I want to continue with what I had originally planned from 2008, 2009, moving forward with kind of a different career path. And I do feel that after seeing the changes that were currently taking place and hearing about the changes, that it just didn't seem like a good fit for me to actually go out and pursue or kind of push a follow-up to my experience that I got to have that was phenomenal and great. But from seeing the changes, I just thought it would probably be different going into 2010.
You're probably very correct. And that marks the last time that I saw you on TV. It was the absolute last time that I recall seeing a new match of, you know, Lorelei Lee. And you weren't doing the sweet cowgirl gimmick when I saw you either.
No, Shimmer in Chicago, that was a very short run for a couple years. And then I think, I want to say 2007 maybe-ish. And then there was a couple years that went by that I wasn't involved with Shimmer. And then but I was still involved in the independent circuit. And I did the TNA thing in 2009. And I was very grateful that they even reached out to me. I mean, I know Lexi and me had worked on sending information to the office, but it was really Amber O'Neill that really pushed for me to be brought on for that special event. So I'm very grateful for her for really pushing the office to even consider me as one of the females to be brought in. And after that, I think, you know, in 2010, I think I did a couple independent matches here and there, but it wasn't like at the beginning of my career or in the middle of, you know, my run as an independent wrestler. Mm-hmm. And then just different things start coming up in different directions in life. And so I was like, well, maybe I just started exploring different other interests out there beyond wrestling, because wrestling on the independent circuit started to slow down for me, and my matches just weren't up to the standards that I felt that a paying fan or audience member should have that quality. Like, I feel like there's a certain quality of a product that I put out there, and with the shows getting further and further between, and I didn't have a place to train because I was no longer living in Tampa. I was up in Pennsylvania. I felt bad. I couldn't justify a promoter bringing me in and compensating me and going out there and not giving the fans what they truly deserve from the match. So I think all of that kind of pulled together to me kind of just stepping away. I don't want to say I quit. I don't want to say I retired. I can't tell you what tomorrow is going to bring. Maybe this opportunity is going to come up and I'm back into wrestling. I don't know. I just know that from me living in a town that didn't really have the wrestling, the schooling or the connections that I needed to maintain my wrestling, and matches being fewer and further between each other, that it wasn't something that I could put myself out there and justify somebody bringing me in. So that's kind of why everyone's like, you went away. And I'm like, yeah, I did, but I did it because I didn't feel that my product was at the same that it needed to be.
Okay. So, see, look, you're still a good person. You didn't even do it for yourself. You did it because I don't want to let you people down. I don't want to give you anything less than the best of me. So, you know, look at that. Even at your core, you're still a good sweetheart of a person.
I try. I really do try. But I mean, how disappointed would you be if you went to go see something and then you're like, well, that's not what I was expecting? I mean, you would be very sad and angry and And it wouldn't be fair. It comes down to it just isn't fair to the fans.
True. Very true. So, since we will call it extended hiatus.
That sounds very good.
Since you haven't officially announced retirement or quit, during this extended hiatus, have you looked back on your career, and is there any particular match that stands out in your memory as the best that you've ever delivered?
Yes. Any specific one? No, because each opponent got to bring a different side of me out. I mean, I really enjoyed my match I had with Mercedes during Wrestlicious. I was so impressed with myself, and that all contributes because of her, really being able, with her abilities to really make me rise up to what I was capable of. You mentioned at Shimmer, Sarah Del Rey, the 3-minute match it was, I had a great time with that. One match that really stood out to me in the past was, it was an all-girls taping out in Ohio under Jeff Cannon, Jessica Havoc. It was like a tournament match, and we were both exhausted, and we looked at each other and like, we really got to go out there and wrestle one more match. And she's like, yeah, how do you want to start it? I go, I just want to end it. And we went out there, and I was like, I'm going to go out. I said, and she's like, how about I just attack you from behind? I'm like, sounds good to me, because we were both like, there was like nothing left in us at that point, and yet we ended up pulling off a very decent match. We've got a lot of compliments on it. She's even come up to me and years later, and she's like, remember that match that we were like exhausted for? I'm like, oh, I don't even remember what even happened in that match. She goes, but a lot of people liked it. So, I mean, just over the years, the different types of matches that were put together overall, I can't really pinpoint one exact one, because all of them, there are certain ones that really meant a lot, as far as, different aspects. So.
Okay. So needless to say, the athleticism that had to go on, and when you talk about a match that you were exhausted in, that is a point that most casual fans, I think the hardcores understand and give respect to it, but the casual fans don't really understand that there's work that goes on between those ropes.
There's a lot. There is a lot of work. There's a lot of, everybody, thinks, oh, anybody can do it. It's so easy until you actually have to do it. There's like a huge disconnect. And even people that they're like, oh, well, I've done this sport and that sport. And I'm like, that's great. But it doesn't mean that professional wrestling is your sport. You kind of tap into what's best for you. And what is really exhausting is taking bump after bump and having to get up and continue a match. It's not the actual physical doing the move. It's when you hit the mat, how much energy and exhaustion leaves your body, but you got to get up and continue.
Now, I would be remiss. I know that you basically touched on this, so I'm going to just lay down this disclaimer first that yes, you in so many words have answered this, but I'm going to ask anyway, because I'm sure they're going to want to hear a direct version of this. So here we go. First, are you wrestling at all these days?
No.
No. During this extended hiatus, do you ever get the itch? Have you ever considered a return to pro wrestling?
No.
No? Okay. There you have it.
If you want a direct answer, no.
That's right.
Am I open to something? Always. But as of right now, I don't roll out of bed and wake up and go, I need to return to wrestling. Like, those thoughts don't cross my mind.
Okay. So to the fans out there, you have your direct answer. No, she's not wrestling currently. No, she's not looking for a return. To the promoters out there that got some money to blow, you might be the ones that can turn her mind around.
I don't think it would come down to a money perspective. Anybody getting into the wrestling business or currently in the wrestling business knows it's not about the money. It's about something inside you wanting to go out there and perform for fans.
Okay, well, let's play the scenario game. So it is not about the money. So we're going to remove the virtual money off of the virtual table here. And in the best scenario that you could present, what do you think it would give you the inkling of the idea that, you know what, I might want to do this. If promoter A was to come to you and say, look, I had this show, I really would like you on here, what is it that he's going to say that's going to make you feel differently other than the money?
I don't think it's anything he can say. If it was a single show, I'm going to respectfully decline. Mm-hmm. As far as that goes, because the training that I would have to re-put back into it to do one match, it's just not in the cards for me, to be quite honest. And if it was more of like a TV series where wrestling was a part of it, but not the full part of it, then that would be something I would consider, because it goes more into maybe an acting role, even though I'm not a great actress. Let me just throw that out there right now. But if it was something along those lines where wrestling was involved in the product and not the primary product, then that's something that I'd be open to.
Okay. So there we have it. If there was something, if Wrestlicious were to return, if WOW were to up and kick into gear, or some other promotion and a variation thereof, it would be something considerable.
Yes.
Or maybe a sitcom that was wrestling based. You know, they had a couple of those. They never did well, but
exactly, something along those lines.
All right, so I need to find a producer that's ready to do his wrestling TV show. Maybe now, they've tried for the last 20 years, I think. Maybe just now, the formula will be correct. Because I think even Roddy Piper and Jesse Ventura couldn't get the series off the ground when they tried, so. Mm-hmm. Who knows? What are you doing these days? We're out of the wrestling business. What is, Lorelei Lee is, the persona is in the closet. She's hanging up, waiting to be reborn. But what is Amy doing?
What I am currently doing is I am in the state of Florida as a skincare licensed specialist. So I work with skincare treatments and facials, and I am a laser technician licensed through my Lorelicious. So I am in health and beauty.
So you are helping people live a beautiful life.
Yes, so to speak.
And a healthy one at that.
Mm-hmm. Trying to.
No, we're just going to say that you're doing it.
Okay.
You're doing it. Now, we're coming down to the end of the run here. So this is where the questions start to vary a bit. You began, you said, in 2004, correct?
Yes.
If, hypothetical question, if the beginning of your career were right now, you're 21 again, it's 2015, you're getting into wrestling, and you have an entirely different landscape that's out there. The independents have kind of blossomed back up. There's pay-per-views, the internet, social media, so on and so forth. Do you think it would have been an easier path today than it was 10 years ago when you began at the time?
It would be easier. I would probably say no.
No.
I think it would be harder.
Really?
And for me personally, yes. Wrestling in general, it might be different. But for me, I was very fortunate on how my cards laid out for me and how I got brought into the business. I couldn't have asked for a better way to, kind of find the people that I found, and they really helped blossom me and carry me in and brought me into the business. Today with social media and things like that, there's so much out there that if I were to do it and I didn't have those people that I had, I think I would be lost. I think I would be swept up into a whirlwind of things that aren't me, and I think it would be harder because you have to prove that you are a true wrestler, that you're just not saying you wrestled, or some people out there claim they're wrestlers and they haven't been trained and they don't have the skill set needed, whereas when I broke in, everything was word of mouth. It was, well, who recommended you or who trained you, and now it's like it's a dime a dozen. So you're not really quite sure what you're getting from people. So to put me out on all the social medias, they still don't know who they're going to be getting in the end, and most promoters are still going to go from word of mouth. So I think it would be harder today to get out there and really put yourself out there. And social media, it's a fine line. It's great for some aspects, but then, there's the hidden world of social media that isn't all that great for you also.
True.
So, I don't know. But I would say how I broke into the business and got started, it was what was meant for me. Doing it today, I'd be kind of skeptical with so many people throwing themselves out there on social media, because every day on social media, everybody's a something. If you look at everybody, they're claiming that they're something. Not saying that they're not, but how do you weed out through social media the ones that are legit from the ones that are claiming that they're legit?
True. Very true. You brought up a very interesting point that I know that have really annoyed some promoters that I have met here, that there have been at least 3 young ladies that have made claim on being wrestlers that at some point or another have openly admitted they have 0 training.
Yeah.
And
so
they've had horrible matches. And I think only one of which actually still exists online, because she after they just, I don't want to say verbally assaulted her, but they were upset. She killed her YouTube channel and took all that stuff down. Like the matches just were not good at all. So yes, that is a lesson to be learned there, kids. Please go get your training before you hurt somebody or yourself or whatever. It is time for the random questions. This is where I get some not necessarily wrestling related stuff, but the questions that you're just going to give me a quick answer that pops into your head from the same questions that I've produced that just came out of my head that I wrote down like a night ago. So here we go. Real bull, mechanical bull, or you won't ride one at all?
Oh, I've never got to ride a real bull before, but I would love to. But I have rode a mechanical one, but a real bull would be totally in the realm on my bucket list.
Holy crap.
Oh, yeah. I think I would be scared. I would probably have to use the bathroom like 5 times before, but yeah, it's one of those things if you get an opportunity, you can't just pass up.
Okay. Yeah, there we go. That's the first one down. Guilty pleasure food. We know you're a fitness gal, but I have the fear that everybody's got their little guilty pleasure thing that they shouldn't be having. But what is it?
I don't have one.
No.
My favorite food is actually bananas. But I also follow what's called flexible dieting, so I keep all my ratios in check, and it allows you to eat anything just as long as it falls within your numbers, and moderation is key to anything. So those that deprive themselves are, a lot of times it ends up being a bad situation at the end of it all. So I really don't restrict myself from anything. But bananas are my favorite food.
Okay, well, there you have it. If you want to learn about, what did you call it, flexible dieting?
Yeah, if you Google flexible dieting, I mean, I know there's a lot of bad rap about it, but I mean, it's all about modification and how you can achieve the body and look you want through, you know, modifying your foods and just hitting your numbers.
Well, you have to ask Amy about that.
Just Google flexible dieting.
Okay. DDP yoga or stratosphere yoga, a.k.a. Trish Stratus yoga?
Wait, what about yoga? Wait.
DDP
I've done hot yoga, but I've never done Trish yoga.
You haven't? Okay, you haven't done her? Yeah, you know she has a yoga studio. And so does Diamond Dallas Page. So
yes, I do know that they have programs out there, but I'm not a DVD watcher.
So, well, I'm going to ask you, flip the coin. If you were going to accept a free DVD from somebody, or take the class, let's just skip the DVD session.
I'm always open to any class that's offered to me because it's a great experience to see what else is out there. The DVD, I will be flat out honest, I am one of those people that I put it in and I sit on the couch and I eat food while I watch it.
Well, that defeats the purpose. Okay, fair enough. We'll call that a draw. There's no clear winner between DDP yoga and stratosphere yoga. She calls that a draw. Name an occupation that you hope that you never have to do. With all due respect to the people that do the occupation.
I would have to say, like, something with feces. Anything that deals with cleaning up or wiping or anything, whether it be like, yeah, I would say something with feces that, we'll just leave it like that.
So no job pertaining to fecal matter.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, unless it's like a little baby and, you know, you're babysitting, you have to, like, change a diaper. I'm okay with that, but to, like, go shovel, like, feces somewhere, that's not really something I would take part in.
Well, somebody's got to do it. But,
somebody does, yeah.
but not you. You don't have to.
Well, you know what? I take that back because I found out that alpaca poo is actually valuable, and so apparently, well, if you own them, you have to shovel up their poo. You might have to sell it. So I might not be opposed to that. So I guess it depends on the situation. Okay, maybe a porta pot cleaner person. That's not something I would want to do.
Okay, so that we're not very likely to see you in a jumpsuit cleaning out the porta potty.
No.
Okay. Last random question: if you had a time machine, you could go back and tell your 20-year-old self some advice, what would you have to say?
I tell myself. I don't know. I guess enjoy it while it lasts, but I got to really enjoy my 20s, so I don't know.
No, you wouldn't go back.
That would be like a pondering question on what I would tell myself.
You wouldn't go back and give yourself the lottery numbers for the next 3 Super Bowl winners or something like that?
Well, that would be cheating. So, I mean, I'm sure that thought would probably cross my mind if I thought about it, and I would more than likely do it because who wouldn't? But yeah, like for a quick blurt out thing, I don't know what I would say.
Okay.
But I like your lottery idea a lot.
You do. Okay. Well, I think most people would like that, especially if you've seen Back to the Future 2. Just as long as you're not going to turn into Biff and corrupt the town, I think you'll be fine. So, and lastly, this is beyond the random questions. The last thing that I like to ask people is the fantasy booking. Now, I know you've been away from the wrestling scene for, a little bit of time now. We will reiterate, not officially retired.
Yeah.
But if you were to fantasy book the return of Lorelei Lee to any promotion that you wanted, under any circumstances that you wanted, against any opponent that you wanted, how would that go down?
Oh, I don't know. I never fantasized about it, so I don't know. Or that would be Should I pick like a top choices?
Sure.
Okay. Top choices, I would have to say Mercedes,
Okay.
Amber, Lexi. I would say those would be my top 3 choices. Oh, Jessica, you can throw Jessica in there. Top 4 choices. Top 4.
Okay. That would be the fantasy booking from your mouth to the world.
Oh, you can throw in Sarah Del Rey there too, because she's just phenomenal. So. See, my list is going to keep going. You might as well, can we just call it like a Royal Rumble? Let's just make it easier in life.
Okay, well, we'll say Lorelei Lee's Fantasy Rumble. That way you'd be able to take on everybody at one time, or maybe just talk a gauntlet match. You just take them one after the other. You'd be completely exhausted. But
yeah, that's why I was thinking gauntlet. Those were your words. I learned after my tournament matches how I wouldn't ever say that ever again.
well, you're in health and fitness now. I think that you have the pacing at least. You probably have the cardiovascular set up there for you to be able to at least go a good 40 minutes. I think so. That's just me. Now, Mr. Green's own personal fantasy booking would have been as such. Lorelei Lee appears at an episode of TNA Impact as an attendee. Just there witnessing the show, one of the TNA staff recognizes you and proceeds to do an interview on the spot. While you're there, learns that you moved on from wrestling and that, it's been one of those last little lingering things that you want to do because, I never had the big shot. And, of course, the staff person can't grant that, but from the back comes the reigning, whomever the Knockouts champion will be, fill in the blank. And she says, can't give it to you tonight, but at the next pay-per-view, blah, 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 Knockouts Knockdown, I'd be more than willing to defend it and give you that one big moment. And thus, we go off into a month worth of promos promoting the big comeback story of the year. That is the fantasy booking as presented by me.
No, okay.
There we go. So you have gone through all of the questions, and I certainly appreciate it because I know that you like you said, you're on an extended hiatus and really have nothing to gain off of doing these interviews these days, but it is very, very sweet of you to take this on, let us talk to you and share with the world and your fan base what exactly you've been doing, what you've been up to, and, how your career started and so on and so forth. We really appreciate the time that you've granted here today.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I appreciate you reaching out to me and, like you mentioned, trying to find out what happened along the way from me being pretty active in wrestling to non-existent. So I thank you very much for your time of interviewing me and kind of seeing what has happened over the course of over the past few years.
Well, it is certainly my pleasure, and I do believe that, maybe one day David McLean or the young man that did Wrestlicious will pop up out of the blue and say, hey, we got one more job for you.
All right. Well, if you happen to be in the Tampa area and you're at a Shine Wrestling show, I've been known to show up and, give my support to the promotion and to the girls on the show. So, don't be bashful. Come up, say hi if you want to, and, it would be nice to get to meet some of the Lorelei Lee fans out there.
Well, there you have it, folks. If you are at the Shine tapings or the iPay-per-views, go up and say hey to her. She's not going to bite.
Exactly.
That's wonderful. I certainly want to thank Ms. Lorelei Lee for coming on to the podcast today. And if you so desire, you can get the MP3 version of this on iTunes. It's always available on YouTube, which has the graphic of the lovely Ms. Lorelei Lee in all her splendor on the page for you to look at while you are listening to her speak. And with that, you have several other interviews and matches and blog posts all scattered throughout the YouTube channel that you can pick and choose from that all should be very entertaining. So with that, folks, I want to thank you all. Be sure to check out the Facebook page, and we will get with you later.
Promotional consideration presented by the following. Get your nerd-themed mystery box delivered to your door once a month, every month, with Nerd Block. Outstanding gear, toys, and collectibles. Choose your nerd theme, get your package, open your block, and let the fun begin. Visit nerdblock.com and get started. That's nerdblock.com. Nerd Block.